Hook, the battle history misunderstood. When people talk about the Battle of Yarmouk, they usually say one thing. This is where Byzantium lost the Middle East. That statement is true, but it is also incomplete, because Yarmouk was not just a clash between Byzantines and Muslims. It was not simply a military defeat, and it was not an isolated moment. Yarmouk was the moment the ancient world's balance of power, carefully maintained for centuries, collapsed in a single irreversible shock. After Yarmouk, three empires would never be the same. One would retreat into survival mode, one would vanish from history, and one would rise faster than anyone believed possible. The ancient balance. For centuries before Yarmouk, the Near East lived under a fragile equilibrium. The Byzantine Empire in the west, the Sassanian Persian Empire in the east, two superpowers locked in endless rivalry. They fought wars that lasted decades. They devastated cities, drained treasuries, and exhausted generations. But neither could destroy the other. This balance, bloody, brutal, but stable, defined the late ancient world. And then, both empires made the same mistake. The war that broke the old world. In the early 6th century, Byzantium and Persia entered one final catastrophic war. It was total war. Cities burned, sacred relics were seized, armies marched again and again across the same ruined lands. Byzantium eventually emerged victorious, but barely. Persia was shattered, and both empires were hollow. Their armies were exhausted, their borders overstretched, their people broken. Neither noticed the storm gathering in Arabia. A new force no one took seriously. From the deserts of Arabia emerged a power the ancient world barely understood. Not an empire, not a kingdom, not even a nation in the traditional sense, a community bound by faith, discipline, and momentum. The early Muslim armies were small but unified, light but fast, outnumbered but purposeful. At first, Byzantium and Persia dismissed them as raiders. They would regret that arrogance. The collapse of Persia. Before Yarmouk even began, one empire was already dying. The Sassanian Persian Empire, ancient, wealthy, powerful, collapsed with shocking speed. Internal revolts, succession crises, crushed armies. Within a few years, Persia, the equal of Rome for centuries, ceased to exist. This alone should have terrified Byzantium, but instead the empire believed the storm had passed. It had not. Byzantium stands alone. By 636 AD, Byzantium faced the Muslim armies alone in Syria. Emperor Heraclius knew the danger. He gathered one of the largest armies the empire could still field, drawn from across its territories. Veterans, allies, multiple commanders. On paper, this force should have crushed the invaders. The Byzantines believed numbers, experience, and tradition would carry the day. They marched toward the Yarmouk River and walked into history's turning point. The battlefield. Yarmouk was not a single dramatic charge. It was 6 days of grinding, brutal combat. Heat, dust, exhaustion. The Byzantine army was large, but slow and divided by internal rivalries. The Muslim armies were smaller, but unified under commanders like Khalid ibn al-Walid. Where Byzantine relied on structure, the Muslims relied on flexibility, and flexibility mattered. The first days, testing the lines. Early engagements were inconclusive. Byzantine infantry pushed forward. Muslim lines bent but did not break. Cavalry clashed. Positions shifted. Each day, the Byzantines tried to force a decisive engagement. Each day, Khalid adapted. He rotated troops, he exploited gaps, he preserved morale. This was not reckless aggression, it was controlled pressure. The decisive moment. On the final day, Khalid made his move. While Byzantine forces focused on the center, Muslim cavalry struck the flanks, then the rear, then the routes of retreat. The Byzantine army found itself trapped, not by walls, but by momentum. What followed was not just defeat, it was disintegration. An army breaks. Units fought bravely, but alone. Commanders could not communicate. Allies panicked. Formations collapsed. Thousands were driven into ravines. Others fled blindly into the desert. The Byzantine army, the last great field force in the East, ceased to exist, and with it died any hope of reclaiming Syria. The aftermath, more than territory. Yarmouk didn't just cost Byzantium land, it cost confidence. Syria was lost, Jerusalem would fall, Egypt would follow. The empire survived, but transformed, from expansion to defense, from dominance to endurance. Byzantium would never again be the unquestioned superpower of the ancient world. The Third Empire rises. For the Muslim world, Yarmouk was not merely a victory, it was confirmation that unity mattered more than numbers, that mobility mattered more than armor, that belief could overcome tradition. Within decades, a new empire stretched from Spain to Persia, not because Yarmouk created it, but because Yarmouk proved it was unstoppable. Why Yarmouk changed history. Yarmouk shattered a system that had existed for centuries. Rome versus Persia, East versus West, two giants locked in endless struggle. After Yarmouk, that world was gone. The ancient era ended, not with a slow fade, but with a decisive collapse. 3 empires stood at Yarmouk. Only one walked away whole. Final reflection. Yarmouk reminds us of a brutal truth about history. Power is not inherited, balance is not permanent, and dominance can vanish in a single generation. Empires don't fall when they lose battles. They fall when the world changes and they fail to notice. Closing CTA. If you want more cinematic deep dives into the battles that reshaped civilizations, not just who won, but why the world changed, subscribe to the channel. Because history isn't just about the past, it's about the moment everything stopped being the same.